Ratchet and Clank have always been two of my favorite video game characters growing up as a kid. Till this day, I still remember seeing the original Ratchet and Clank commercial from 2002. When I originally saw this ad, I knew this game was going to be big. I don't know what it was about this commercial, but something inside me clicked, and somehow I knew I had to have this game. The commercial was just that appealing, but they didn't even need to show that much footage from the game. The commercial was just so funny, it didn't even matter. I almost wish they did other Ratchet and Clank commercials like this. I just think these characters really work well in 2D animation. At the time, this game was unlike anything I've ever played before. You can travel to different planets, unlocking dozens of unique weapons and gadgets. Anyway, since I'm such a big fan of the franchise, I thought I'd review the original Ratchet & Clank game from 2002. Ratchet & Clank were created by Insomniac Games, who are also responsible for creating the Spyro franchise. Spyro the Dragon was owned by Universal Interactive and Insomniac Games. Insomniac only had a contract to create the first 3 Spyro games with Universal. Despite the fact that Insomniac created Spyro, Universal owned the rights to the character. So after their contract was expired, Insomniac was forced to create a new franchise from scratch. Both Ratchet and Clank went through several different designs in their early development stages. Ratchet was originally designed to look more like a lizard-type creature, and Clank was originally meant to be several smaller robots, each having different capabilities. Eventually, Ratchet was designed to be more of a cat-like creature, and instead of having several robots, the developers settled for just one robot that would attach to Ratchet's back. One thing I really love about Ratchet and Clank games would have to be the stories. It's one of the most important elements of making a Ratchet and Clank game. In the story, Ratchet and Clank have to stop the evil Chairman Drek from harvesting and destroying large chunks of planets so that he can create a brand new one for his species, the Blarg. The Blargian home planet is no longer a sustainable place to live, due to it being overpopulated and severely polluted. Ratchet and Clank decide to stop Drek's evil plans by seeking the help of one of the greatest heroes in the galaxy, Captain Quark, who, as it turns out, is secretly working with Chairman Drek. The game has dozens of different weapons and gadgets. One of my favorite weapons would have to be the Devastator, which I believe is one of the most effective weapons in the game. If you're stuck on a really hard level, the Devastator is one of the most powerful weapons to use. Another one of my favorite weapons would have to be the Visibomb gun. It's a remote-controlled missile launcher which enables you to attack bad guys from an incredibly far distance. This weapon is really useful when it comes to avoiding attacks almost entirely. For some reason, the Visibomb gun was only included in the first 2 games, which I think is a real shame because it's one of the most powerful weapons in the game. I'll never understand why this weapon has never been featured in any other Ratchet & Clank games ever since. The Devastator and the Visibomb gun are very powerful, but the most powerful weapon in the entire game is definitely the Rhino. You can take out absolutely anything with this gun. It's worth 150,000 bolts. I don't think this weapon is really worth purchasing. By the time you get enough bolts, you would have already 100%ed the entire game. I just wish this weapon was a little cheaper, because it really is a good weapon. It's just way too expensive, so it's just not worth it. I know some of you might not agree with me, but I have never managed to get enough bolts to actually purchase the Rhino. Almost all the weapons in this game can be upgraded. including Clank, which can be upgraded from a helicopter pack to a rocket pack and even a hydro pack, which enables you to swim faster underwater. Clank is also a playable character in this game. He doesn't have his own weapons, but he does have the ability to control smaller robots, which he can use to defend himself in battle. Clank can also turn into Giant Clank to defeat more powerful foes. The game also includes hoverboard races, which are pretty fun, and they do offer a bit of a challenge. Some reason none of the other games even have hoverboard races, with the exception of Ratchet and Clank Size Matters. To be honest, I really wish they would include the hoverboard races in other Ratchet and Clank games, but for some reason they just don't. Which I think is a real shame, because the hoverboard races are pretty good, and I really think they should include this in future titles. One of the biggest flaws in the game would have to be the weapon select screen. The game doesn't pause to let you select a different weapon, leaving you vulnerable to attack. This makes it very frustrating when you're trying to select a different weapon and avoid enemy fire at the same time. The developers saw this was a problem in the first game, so ever since they fixed it so you can now pause the screen to change weapons. Another problem I found in the game is the lack of checkpoints. You could be halfway through the level only to die and be forced to start from the beginning. I don't remember it being this frustrating when I was a kid. Some reason it didn't bother me so much back then. One thing that tends to bother most players would be the Trespasser, which allows you to unlock doors to get through different areas. Honestly, I don't find these puzzles to be that frustrating. Even when I was a kid, I never really got stuck on these very often. They're just not as difficult as people say they are. The original Ratchet and Clank game was made exactly 20 years ago, and although it's a fairly old game, it's still definitely worth playing. There's just so much to explore in this game. You can really tell the developers put their heart and soul into making this the best game it can be. Obviously, the graphics aren't quite up to today's standards, but it honestly doesn't matter to me. I played this game a lot when I was a kid. I still never really get tired of it. No matter how many times I play it, you can never truly get sick of a game that's this good. This game definitely deserves a 10 out of 10. It's a fantastic game, and I couldn't recommend it enough. If you're a Ratchet and Clank fan and you've never played the original game, you are definitely missing out. I know it's an old game, but it's still one of the best games on the PlayStation 2. Well, that's about it for this video. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.